So how do we appraise or how do we interpret a mood disorder appraisal? Well, this is an appraisal completed by the sort of fake patient Bob Smith on the 21st of July 2014. Now, when we're interpreting an appraisal, there are three main components of the screen to be aware of. So the first is, of course, the chart here. Now, the y-axis, 0 to 100, refers to 0 to 100%. And these 84, 76, or 84%, 76%, etc. Now, the higher the graph or the greater the percentage, the more deficient that patient potentially is in that neurotransmitter. So that's the first area of the screen. The second area of the screen is sort of the nutrient neurotransmitter link. Now again, we've got the neurotransmitter deficiency listed here, but we also have the nutrient substrate that is important to support that neurotransmitter. Now, the MDA does work on a system of deficiency, not excess, so it doesn't really assess neurotransmitter excess, but really only assesses neurotransmitter deficiency. And the final part of the screen is, of course, the actual results themselves. So this lists all of the questions and the patient's answers and how they answered it. Now, this can be quite helpful in addition to the chart, because it gives you some insight into how the patient obviously answered them. These might be questions that you didn't ask during the consult. It might give you an opportunity to not go too much into those questions necessarily and just give you some background information when the patient completes the appraisal. Now, the full use of the mood disorder appraisal really is a balance between the MDA results, the questions, the nutrients that should be required, as well as your case history, some pathology tests, anything like that that you can begin to triangulate and sort of say, well, you know, the histamine's really low, they've got high homocysteine as well, therefore maybe, you know, SAMI's involved or something like that, depending on all the results and how they all come together. But just looking at the MDA itself, how do we actually take this graph and think, okay, well, what nutrients should I be thinking for in this patient? What we want to look at is essentially what the most efficient neurotransmitters might be. So in this patient, we've got phenylethylamine, we've got histamine, we've got melatonin, we've got dopamine. Then it sort of levels out to your next section, which is norepinephrine, acetylcholine, GABA, serotonin, and then your endogenous opioids and epinephrine later on. So the first thing that we look at with the mood disorder appraisal and try to identify are the neurotransmitters which share a similar substrate. Now, this is evident from the neurotransmitter link here. So we've got melatonin, you're really looking at tryptophan or 5-HTP, dopamine is tyrosine, norepinephrine is tyrosine, acetylcholine is acetylcarnitine, acetyl L-carnitine and choline, etc. GABA and glutamate are both glutamine, etc. So what we want to do is we want to find, are there any similarities between them? So in this instance, we've got a couple of neurotransmitters that really are more deficient than the rest. We're looking at, trying to identify that common link. So here we've got phenylethylamine is tyrosine, histamine is histidine, melatonin is tryptophan. So there's actually not a link there between all of them. So instead of giving them all three nutrients, which could actually cost them a lot of money, and maybe they actually don't need all of them, we can either, choose a neurotransmitter system that we really want to support. Maybe in this patient, sleep is a big issue, so melatonin is sort of the one that we really want to support, but we might ask them questions around histamine, ask them some questions about allergies or whether they take antihistamines and how that affects them, their sleepiness, etc. However, another way of sort of looking at this is because you've got phenylethylamine is sort of your phenylalanine tyrosine pathway, histamine, as I said, is histidine, melatonin is tryptophan. Because they're so diverse, I would also probably take into account the fact that the other neurotransmitters, although not as deficient as these three, are all sort of, there's a plateau here between them, and again, all the substrates are very diverse. In this instance, I'm thinking, why do they have such a broad spectrum deficiency? So I'm looking at protein intake, B vitamins, and digestion. This patient might be better to simply take a hydrochloric acid supplement or something like that to help with the digestion and absorption of the proteins themselves, as well as increasing the variety and amount of protein in their diet. Each MDA will change depending on obviously the results and the clinical case and that sort of thing, but hopefully that gives you a basic overview of how we approach the MDA and some basic ways of looking at the MDA and interpreting the results. The MDA is of course not a diagnostic tool or anything like that. It is simply a tool that's used to flag some neurotransmitters that might be worth supporting, and if you have any questions, always contact tech support.